Your confidence and your self-awareness will increase if you learn to need less, if you learn to turn off, specifically at the end of the day, needing less stimulation, turning off your cell phone, putting it on airplane mode and allowing yourself to just be present, allowing yourself to be in flow, allowing yourself to need less. We are in a world where we need more and more stimulation. We've trained our bodies and we've become addicted literally to having stimulation. And so think about it, at the end of your day, do you need that last scroll? Do you need to watch that last video? Or can you need less? Can you turn off the consumption? Can you slow it down? There is huge power in watching yourself slow things down, becoming deliberate, becoming present, turning off, needing less. You don't need that other video. You don't need that last like. You don't need that last hit of dopamine. Instead, shut it down. Turn off your cell phone. Be present. Be engaged with those around you. Pull out your journal at the end of your day and literally write down everything that happened. Write down in bullets. It can be so fast and easy. It takes a minute or two. Just write down the events that occurred and then write what you're grateful for. Write what you want to accomplish the next day. No more than 3 key activities. And just write whatever else comes to your mind. If you give yourself this space, your awareness will increase. Your confidence will increase because you're now acting with intention. You're now mindful of the moment. You're less reactive, less distractive, less needy. It's so powerful as you end your day needing less, turning off, slowing down, being aware, being grateful, becoming intentional about the next day, and then waking up and not needing to just jump into more stimulation, not needing to be ping-ponged around, but keeping your mind slow, pulling out your journal, writing things that you're grateful for, writing what you're going to accomplish that day. Just being in the zone. It allows you to get really clear on your thoughts. It allows you to get very clear with your time. It's amazing how much time you lose by needing more and more stimulation. You get to the point where you're very comfortable losing 10, 15, 20 minutes here and there, and on a regular basis, you're losing hours and hours and hours every day, and you're not getting into momentum. You're not clear on your thoughts. You're not clear on your actions. You're missing the creative flow that can happen. Whereas if you give yourself permission to need less, to turn off, to slow down, to get intentional, you start to get really clear in your mind. You start to get really clear with your thoughts. You start to become a lot more creative. You get a lot more access to your subconscious. You get a lot more thoughts on creativity. You get really clear on your goals. You can become far more intentional. You can then start easily knocking out things. When you're in a flow state, when you're operating in that higher alpha or theta state, which means your mind is slow, you're not overly stimulated. And when you're just in flow, you can completely perform at a high level. When you're at flow, you can accomplish things in minutes that would take hours, weeks, months of non-flow. And most people are so used to not being in flow because they're so reactive, so distracted, so needing more. They sit down to work and they try to concentrate and focus for a few minutes and then a notification comes off, or they need to distract themselves. They're not in flow, and so their mind is scattered. How you do anything is how you do everything, and if you can learn to slow yourself down and need less and consume less at the end of your day, and then wake up and have the discipline of keeping your mind slow, of tapping into intention, of actually having a plan, of following through with that plan before you dip into the consumption. If you have that plan, let's just say the 3 things you want to accomplish in the morning, those 3 important things. If you allow yourself in the morning to stay slow and keep your phone on airplane mode and not engage in the distraction until you've accomplished, first off, your interconnection, first off, your gratitude, your intention, whatever creative breakthroughs occur, and then if you actually accomplish something meaningful, something important before that, then you increase your confidence exponentially, because then you're actually watching yourself do what you want to do, and you're living intentionally, you're living purposefully, your brain is actually operating at a really high level. Your thoughts are clear, they're more organized, it's easy to take action, you're less reactive, distracted. Then, after you've actually accomplished something meaningful, after you've connected with yourself, after you've connected with your higher power, after you've gotten clear on your day, after you've actually moved your life forward towards your future self, all of those things build insane confidence. Confidence is the byproduct of prior performance. Confidence comes from watching yourself do what you want to do. So if at the end of your day, you actually give yourself a big 3 things you want to accomplish the next day or the next morning, you wake up and you actually follow through. Then you trust yourself that you can do it again, but at a higher level. Confidence becomes the basis of your imagination. Albert Einstein said imagination is more important than knowledge. And so as you build your confidence, your imagination for what you can do increases, but also your belief that you actually can do it. One of the reasons why people don't go on to succeed is because they don't believe they can succeed. Now there's two reasons they don't believe they can succeed. Number one is they don't have confidence because they don't trust themselves. But number two, they don't know how to find the right information that would help them succeed. You won't pursue something or take it seriously unless you believe it's possible, unless you believe it's likely, unless you see its relevance. Just think about, for example, investing. Think about, it could be Bitcoin, it could be other things. There's a reason why a lot of people don't invest in their long-term future when it comes financially, and that's because they don't either believe they can, or they're unclear of how to do it. They don't know how to succeed. And so they don't actually step forward because they don't believe they can and they don't know how to succeed. Well, as you take action towards your future self, as you progressively use your time better, especially in the mornings, and then after you've accomplished something great, you've built your confidence, not only will your confidence increase, but your knowledge of what you can accomplish will increase. Then go ahead, open up your phone, become the ping pong ball for the day. But from there, you actually operate with a lot more intention. Again, how you do anything is how you do everything. If you've learned to slow it down, if you've given yourself the permission and the discipline to need less stimulation, to need less of those 1 more, 2, 3, 4 more things, and you can just slow down, let it go. Be grateful, be present where you're at. Enjoy today, enjoy tomorrow. Take action on your future self. Be in love with the process, yet committed to your future self. Then when you actually do start using your cell phone or your email, you start using it a lot more intentionally. Maybe you make better rules around it. You feel like you don't have the need to respond immediately to various things. Again, it's removing need. You don't need to respond to that email. You don't need to check your Facebook. You don't need to do whatever it is you think you do. You then begin operating based on want. And you have less attachment, less distraction, and less addiction. And you can then slow things down entirely. And by slowing things down, you actually speed things up. By slowing things down, you can actually get clear on where you want to go, and then you can take mindful but also flow-based action towards your future self in the direction you actually want to go. There's the analogy that airplanes spend about 95% or more of time off course because they're constantly being hit by turbulence and by like wind pressure and all these things. They're always kind of being knocked off course, but there's this inertial guidance system that's constantly course correcting. So despite the fact that airplanes are off course 95% of the time, they arrive at their intended destination usually on time, on average on time. And that's because they're constantly course correcting. Well, this is why you want to have your slow down morning, evening routines, slowing it down. By just writing things down, writing what you've done. But also I would invite you to give yourself a few minutes just to try to get aware of what's going on in your head or what's going on in your emotions. Mindfulness is the awareness of what's going on. It's the awareness of what's going on non-judgmentally. Rather than being caught up emotionally, you're just aware of what's going on. And we all have so much stress and pressure in our lives. There's a lot going on. The world's coming at you fast. You've got bills to pay. You've got projects you're working on. You may have kids. You have situations. You have more stress and pressure on you than you're aware of. And if you just simply numb that through consumption, you're just burying it and you're creating a pressure cooker inside of you and you're becoming less and less clear and connected to yourself. Whereas if you slow it down and get in your journal and just write about what's going on, what's going to happen is you're going to release it. There's a lot of research that shows that writing in your journal, first off, it just simply clears your mind. It also allows you to regulate your emotions. It allows you to get clear on what's going on and it allows you to release it. Just yesterday, as an example, last night, I really, like so many others, wanted to just watch one more video, but I decided throw the phone on airplane mode, pull out the journal, write what happened, write what I'm going to knock out tomorrow, and then I just started writing about what I was dealing with, and I am dealing with various situations right now, stresses in my work. And just by writing it down, I was able to think about it differently. When you write something down, it's different from just disorganized thought. If you just keep it in your head, it's disorganized thought. But if you write it down, you turn it into a narrative. And a narrative has an arc, a beginning, middle, and end. And then you can understand it, you can contain it, you can control it. And then you can let it go. You can understand it, name it, let it go. or clear it, and whatever that means. And so you can regulate your emotions, and that's why a lot of research shows that just simply by writing down what's going on in your life, writing down your emotions, writing down potentially your stresses, writing down your goals, all of these things increase your physical health over time. Literally, research has shown that. Writing down about your emotions, your challenges, and even your goals over time increases your physical health. It allows you to slow things down. It allows you to be more aware of yourself. And then from there, you can just move forward, less cluttered, more clear. And that's kind of your inertial guidance system. If you're not doing that regularly, you're off way more than you think. Even if an airplane is off by 1 degree for a really long period of time, over, let's just call it hundreds of miles, the gap becomes huge over time. That's the compound effect. So if you're not constantly correcting, if you're not giving yourself time to connect with yourself, clear your emotions, get clear on what you need to do, clarify your path, then you are more mixed up than you think you are, and your emotions are likely out of whack, and you're more distracted than you think you are. And in order to resolve this internal turmoil, you're just numbing yourself through some form of stimulation, probably through your phone and through food and through other forms of unhealthy distractions, which pull you away from becoming confident, which pull you away from creating your future self, which pull you away from becoming aware of what your future self would want you to be aware of. Think about what your future self is up to. Your future self is not you. Your future self is doing things and striving for things and has created outcomes that you're not even currently aware of or even thinking about. It's that whole idea that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the second best time is now. Well, for your future self, the 20 years ago might be right now, but if you're so distracted, reactive, and numbing yourself, then you may not be planting the seeds that will eventually become your future self, their situation in their life. But if you can clear that, then you can decide, well, what is the orchard I want to plant? What's the destination I want to get to? How can I remove the clutter from my life? Remove the things that are no longer necessary. Remove the things that may have reflected my past life, my former self, but no longer resonate with my future self. So I just invite you to give yourself permission, but also have the discipline to turn off, to slow down, to need less, to become more clear, to give yourself a simple system of just connecting with yourself, clearing your emotions, clearing what's going on with you, getting clear on what you want, living with intention, building confidence every day, approaching your future self, not avoiding life. As you approach your future self and become an active learner, and as you take active action steps towards your future self, you're going to become more confident, but you're also going to learn whatever is required so that you can know you can be successful at whatever it is you want. That's part of having a growth mindset, is knowing that you can succeed at whatever it is you want, whether that's health, whether that's business, whether that's investing, whether that's relationships. Rather than just avoiding those things and then numbing yourself, you actively learn those things and develop the skills, the capabilities, the confidence, and you watch yourself follow through enough that you can begin imagining a bigger future self with whatever it is you want. And then you can engage in what psychologists call deliberate practice, which is intentional, focused, meaningful learning in an approach-oriented way where you approach and actively learn the things that you want. You get feedback, you test, you try, you get better, and over time you become a new version of yourself. In this video, I'm going to share with you 7 simple reasons why you procrastinate. But before I do that, I'm going to share with you a cool picture that explains how motivation works, because until you know how motivation works, you won't understand why you procrastinate. So let me quickly share my screen with you. This is a picture created by the culture design company called Gaping Void. Their work's amazing. So this is the 3 steps of motivation based on expectancy theory, which is one of the core theories of motivation. So in order to be motivated, you need all 3 of these things. First off, you need a compelling goal. You need a compelling outcome that excites you. If you don't have a compelling goal or outcome, you're not going to be motivated. Next, you need A to B. You need an actual path to creating that outcome. So if this is where you are and this is where your outcome is, if you don't see the path, if you don't know how to get there, you're not going to be motivated. It's like you may have the goal to be a millionaire, but if you don't know how to get there, then you're going to not be that motivated. Part of motivation is finding or discovering or creating the pathway between you and that goal. Number 3 is actually having the confidence or the belief that your actions matter and that you actually can go from A to B. You can learn what it takes, and you can find or discover or walk that path, whatever it may be, or you can create better paths along the way. So you need these 3 things in order to have motivation. And with that said, now I'm going to explain why you procrastinate. The number one reason is that you're just not clear on the goal. You don't actually know what you want, And so there's too many competing possibilities. You need to clarify the outcome you want. It needs to be very compelling, very exciting. It needs to be very specific. The more clear you are on the outcome, the less you'll procrastinate because you know what you want. So that takes to number 2. There's not enough incentive. Whatever the outcome is, it may not be exciting enough. And so you don't see the real reason for doing it because you just don't value the outcome enough to take action on it. Number 3, it's possible that there's just not enough consequence for inaction. You don't see the consequences of not actually achieving this goal or not achieving it in a timely manner. For you, your perspective is that it doesn't really matter if you procrastinate. It doesn't matter if you don't achieve that goal. So part of actually removing procrastination is making there be huge consequences for not achieving success on this thing. One way to do that is obviously to have other people involved. When you're in partnerships with people, your behavior matters because not only does you not creating the result impact your future self, but it impacts other people. And so the relationship can kind of be what's called a forcing function, where because you're in a relationship with other people, you feel strongly compelled to take action. You also have to ask yourself, if you don't achieve this result, what is that going to cost your future self? If you don't think that the cost is that high, then you're probably not going to be that motivated and you're probably going to procrastinate. So only pursue things where the cost is high for not taking action, where you really value success, and also where the consequences for not moving forward, for not actually doing something today are huge. And part of doing that is actually getting really clear on your future self and really clear on what you want and putting yourself in a position where you have responsibility for your actions. Like if I myself, as one example, I have 5 kids. If I don't actually wake up and work, like there's big consequence for failure. So one of the reasons why you procrastinate is probably because you don't see consequences. And part of not seeing consequences is that you're undervaluing your future self. You're undervaluing that what you do today actually is setting up your future self for either failure or success. And so what you do today actually does matter, and you procrastinating is actually digging somewhat of a pit for your future self. You're not valuing or appreciating what's really going on. Number 4, you're not clear on the path. As I said before, motivation is 3 things. Number 1, you have a goal. Number 2, you have a path to getting there. And number 3, you're building the confidence that you can actually do it by clarifying that path, by finding a better path. And this is actually a huge aspect of motivation, but it's also a huge aspect of hope. So there's a lot of research on hope. And one of the aspects of hope is what's called pathways thinking. And you won't have hope or motivation if you don't see a path to getting what you want. So let's just say you have a goal that you really want, but you don't actually know how to get there. Then you're probably going to procrastinate. And so part of learning and part of growing is actually, first off, finding a path, trying a path, and then fixing the path. There's a lot of research on the difference between high hope people and low hope people. People with high hope, they move forward and they're taking action, and they also adjust their path and find better ways when it's obvious that their former ways weren't producing the results they want. So if you have big goals, take action moving forward towards any path you can find. Research it on Google, ask people for help, figure out a path towards your goal, start taking action. Then as you take action, take stock. And is your current approach actually going to get you there in the time you want? And if not, you're going to have to adjust the path. And the more serious and committed you get towards your future, the more you'll find better ways. Sometimes the best ways take a lot more courage. They're not doing things how you used to do it. What got you here won't get you there. So there's always a better path to achieving what you want. And the more committed you become to this goal, the more you'll find a much more effective and powerful path, even though that path will probably take you out of your current comfort zone. That's how you get there faster. And once you clarify that path, you're gonna get more confidence and excited. So you probably procrastinate because you don't see the best path, or you don't even see a path to getting what you want. Number 5, you don't have the next step. So this goes back to path, but sometimes you procrastinate because you haven't set yourself up for the next step. So the author, Ernest Hemingway, what he would often do is when he was writing, he would sometimes, at the end of the day, he would actually leave himself, he would finish the day halfway through a sentence. And the reason he did that is because when he woke up the next morning, he wanted to actually have the next step in place. He wanted to know what to do. And that's actually one of the reasons why people fail in the morning, is because they didn't set themselves up for success the night before. They don't know the next step when they first wake up. That's why when you go to bed, you actually want to go to bed with a purpose. That's how you have more peak experiences. But also when you wake up, you want to know what to do next. You don't want to make decisions in your hazy, tired state. And one of the reasons people procrastinate is because they haven't set up that next step so that it's easy when they start the next time. For a long time, I was a very prolific writer. I blogged and my blog's been read by literally over 100 million people. But one of the things that helped me write so effectively was that the night before, I just wrote out like a few bullet points of what I would write the next morning. I gave myself the next steps so that when I woke up, I actually had something to work with rather than having to start from scratch. So you're probably procrastinating possibly because you don't know the next step and you haven't set yourself up for that next step. Once you actually take that next step, then motivation really starts kicking in and you start to have some momentum. Number 6, you assume your future self will actually have more time. This is one of the major reasons why people procrastinate, is because they don't value their future self's time. It's a lot easier to value your current self's time than your future self's time. The truth though is that your future self's time is actually worth more than your current self's time. That may sound weird and counterintuitive, especially because we live in a world where we always emphasize the present. But the truth is, from like an investing standpoint, $1 now for your current self is probably worth $5 to $10 for your future self. Like when you're really taking into account compound interest and all of those things. And your current self's time is actually probably worth a lot more too. Now, that's not to say that the present doesn't matter. The present matters a lot. But when you procrastinate, you assume that your future self has all the time in the world. And actually, there you're devaluing your future self's time. If you use your time really well now, your future self's time will be worth 5 to 10 times as much in terms of value. It's just like compound interest. $1 for you today is probably worth $5 to your future self if you invested it properly and if it compounded. That's the same way as time. If you invest your time now well, your future self will have more and better time. If you assume that your future self has all the time in the world, so therefore you'll push off the decision to your future self, you're devaluing your future self's time and you're assuming that your future self has more time than they really have. You're also assuming that your future self cares about what you care about. And that's not true. Your future self doesn't care about what you care about. They're worried about their own issues. They're worried about what's important to them. And by pushing things off to your future self, it's what Carol Dweck would call a fixed mindset. Instead of assuming that your future self cares about what you care about, it's important to realize they're in a more evolved place than you because of what you're doing in the present. You're setting them up for success and you're setting them up for being able to focus on better things. Here's the final reason, number 7. You're not the one to do it. So Dan Sullivan is the founder of Strategic Coach. He's probably the best entrepreneurial coach in the world right now. His company is called Strategic Coach, and he has a concept called Who Not How. And this is something he learned from a guy named Dean Jackson, who's also a genius marketer. But Who Not How is an idea that when you procrastinate, it's because you are excited about the future, but you're not the one to do it. You don't want to go through the steps of the path. Maybe, for example, like as an example, me filming this video, one of the reasons why I might procrastinate doing this is because I don't like editing. But if you get someone else to do that part of it, that's why it's who, not how. One of the reasons you procrastinate is because there's aspects of the path or aspects of the process that you simply don't want to do and that you shouldn't do. And this is where teamwork comes into play. We as a culture and the traditional education system has kind of failed us. It's taught us that by working in teams and by collaborating, we're cheating. In the public education system, if you try to get help from friends, you're cheating. But in the world of business and in the world of work, that's not how it works. You can get other people to help you with your goals. And there's probably aspects of your goal that you shouldn't do. You should do the few things that really you love to do and that you want to do and that you get the most bang for your buck because you've got the skills. But there's aspects of big goals that are outside your skill level or outside your desire. And so you're procrastinating those aspects of the process because there's just too much aspect. And so by getting other people involved, not only do you support them because they want to be involved in your vision, but you also no longer have to procrastinate. You do your part of it, they do their part of it, and things get done a lot faster. And so the faster you can apply who, not how in your life by actually teaming with people, collaborating with people, and honestly hiring people to help you with the parts of the work or the process that you don't want to do, the less you'll procrastinate because you'll focus on the few things you love and you'll let them focus on the things that they love. So those are the 7 reasons, and hopefully that clarifies why you procrastinate. And if you want to increase your motivation, and also if you want to get better results, apply those 7 steps. According to Dan Sullivan, 80% is getting results while 100% is still thinking about it. If you are unwilling to just publish or put your work out there at 80%, then you're never going to actually get anything done. If you're still trying to get perfect, if you're still trying to get it to 100%, you're never going to get there. 80% gets results. 80% means it's done but not perfect. It means that you've put something out there and you're testing it. One of the things that Dan actually talks about, and by the way, Dan is the founder of Strategic Coach, which is the #1 coaching program in the world for entrepreneurs. One of the things he says is you should always actually test your ideas on check writers. But even if you don't have clients that are paying you lots of money and you're testing your new ideas on them, you should be comfortable and willing to test your new ideas on the internet, on the market. This could mean anything. It could mean a product you're selling. It could be an idea you're testing if you're a blogger or a vlogger, if you're throwing out ideas. 80% gets results while 100% is still thinking about it. Let me give an example. This is a book I wrote quite a few, 3 or 4 years ago at this point. And there's a great quote that says that a painting is never finished, it simply ends in an interesting place. A painting is never finished, it simply ends in an interesting place. This book was never finished, it just ended in an interesting place. Done is better than perfect. I got it done, I got it to 80%, and I got it out there. Now, the thing is your future self is going to be a different person than you are now. Your future self is going to see the world differently than you are now. If I was to rewrite this book now, it would be a very different book than what I wrote 3 years ago. But I'm still glad my former self wrote this book. They painted a picture, it was never finished, it ended in an interesting place. So the problem with 100% thinking is that you think that one day you're going to actually get the thing done. Yes, you'll get it done, but it will never be finished. Nothing's ever finished. And so you're better off getting better and better at getting to 80% fast. Get to 80%, get comfortable with 80%, throw it out at 80%, and then from there you can tweak and test it. And the more you put work out there, the more you'll be able to actually get better and better at getting to 80% faster. And the 80% that you create now is fundamentally different from the 80% you used to make. As an example, I've since written multiple other books. Oh, whoops. These 2 books actually came out in 2020. Now, both of them, same as Willpower Doesn't Work, are basically they're paintings that never got finished. They just ended in an interesting place. I could still be writing any and all of those books now, but you have to finish them at some point. The same is true for every video I publish or every article I write. And the same is true of you. I know a lot of people who they procrastinate creating projects, doing anything because they're so busy trying to make it perfect, and they don't realize that 80% gets results, 100% is still thinking about it. And the truth is that your ideas will change and grow over time, but you clog your mind of creative thinking if you're still working on something. As an example, if I was still working on this book, and I was trying to make it perfect, which it will never be perfect, my ideas on this are going to continue to change and evolve. If I had never finished this, I would have never been able to think about the ideas in this book or the ideas in this book. And so by not getting something done, you literally clog your thinking. This is one thing that people don't understand about creativity. It's not a well that you exhaust. It's actually a system that you expand. The more you create, the more you can create, because you become more and more confident putting things out there. You get better and better at chiseling, creating, organizing, and ultimately you get better and better at moving things forward. It's exactly the same as love. The more love you give, the more love you have ability to give love. So it's not like you're going to exhaust your well. I know a lot of people, for example, they may be a coach or a consultant, or they may sell online products, online information products. It could be a book. Just as an example, they have all sorts of ideas, but they don't necessarily want to give them all the way up front because they're trying to keep some of the better stuff on some of maybe their high ticket items. What I have found is that the more you give away up front, the higher quality of stuff you'll come up with for your other work. So you're better off just giving it away all up front, giving away all your best information, emptying your well, so to speak, because then you're actually expanding your well and you're getting better and better at creating things. Now, the 80% rule also works in collaboration. Just as an example, a lot of times when it comes to collaboration, you've got to pass your part of the project off to someone. So for example, if I'm writing a book, I need to pass off my part of it to the editor. Well, if I'm still trying to get it perfect and I don't pass off my 80% to the editor, then they're sitting there waiting for me to get it perfect. And here's the thing, if I just got it to 80% and threw it to them really quick, they would be able to give me insights that I could never get on my own trying to perfect it. And so sometimes you need to actually get your idea and either throw it to the next person on the project or throw it out to the audience. And what happens is the audience then gives you feedback, which then gives you insight that you could have never gotten if you were just away in a cave. There's actually a lot of research on this subject. So I believe it's a quote from Harvard Business Review, but they say that the eureka moment or the lone genius idea is a myth. There's no such thing as a lone genius out there creating in a cave. Creativity is a collaborative process. It's you working with other people. It's you bouncing ideas off of different audiences. And so the faster and faster you can just throw your ideas out there, the faster you can throw your work out there, the more comfortable you can get at 80%, the better and better you'll get at actually finishing projects. And that in and of itself is a skill. In fact, Brian Tracy called it eating the frog. Eating the frog means that very successful people, they get better and better at completing projects. You have to build that muscle. So many people, they can start something. They can start a book. They can start training for a marathon. They can start doing this or that. But very few of them get good at finishing. And finishing is a skill you need to develop. And so one of the reasons why you want to get better and better at being okay with 80% is you need to build that muscle of finishing something, even if it's just finishing a blog post or finishing some small project, finishing the run that you're on, finishing the workout you're on. Again, people can start, but finishing is a muscle you've got to build. And as you get better and better at finishing imperfect things, and then getting better and better at finishing, you'll get better and better at finishing better and better things. So that's the 80% rule. It's essential for anyone who's in the information world. It's essential for anyone who's a creator. It's just getting better at output. There's a lot of research on the idea, for example, the teacher who broke their class, who was a pottery teacher, who broke their class into 2 different groups. And basically the objective was which group could make the better pot. He asked group A to just make as many pots as possible throughout the semester. And he asked group B to make the absolute perfect pot. And so group A just started making tons of pots. They just made pot after pot after pot, and a lot of them were garbage. But by the end of the semester, they'd made like 50 or hundreds of pots, and they had gotten good at making pretty dang good pots, because through the process of creating, ultimately, they got better and better. Whereas the other group, they were trying so hard to make one perfect pot that they couldn't even end up doing it. So group A could consistently make and quickly, and they knew the process because they had finished it over and over again, they could make way better pots, and ultimately they made a way better single pot than the one group, because they were fine churning. And so quantity is ultimately the path to quality. And at the end of the day, once you get better and better and more prolific at your craft, you then ultimately can scale it back a little bit and you can take on bigger projects. But often it takes doing a ton of small projects. If you're a writer, that's a bunch of blog posts. You look at the lives of any of the current top writers or authors in the world right now, a lot of it was churning out literally hundreds of blog posts. You look at musicians churning out hundreds of songs. Eventually you can get to a much higher level where you scale back and you start focusing purely on quality and probably on collaboration versus on individual pursuits. You then work on bigger projects, more collaborative projects, but you've built the skill of finishing. You've built the skill of creating. You've built the skill and the comfort level of going 80%, and you know that nothing's ever going to be finished. And you get quicker and quicker at seeking feedback rather than holding on to your idea. You just openly want feedback. You're especially open to getting feedback from a live audience. It's exactly like professional comedians. Professional comedians, they test hundreds and hundreds of jokes on live audiences. You want to test your ideas on live audiences. Again, Dan Sullivan tests his ideas on paying audiences. He has coaching programs that are $10,000, $25,000, $50,000 a year, and he tests his ideas on check writers because they're the ones who ultimately are more invested. But you can and should test your ideas as fast as possible on audiences, because the faster you get that feedback, the faster you can transform the idea. That's another great concept from Dan, is he talks about how his part of the creative process is only 50%. The second 50% is from the feedback of the audience, which then transforms the idea moving forward. That requires a great deal of what psychologists would call psychological flexibility. You've got to be willing to be flexible, not hold on to your ideas not too long, not overly think about and overly, spin your wheels. You quickly get it to an efficient 80%, throw it out to the audience, test it, then keep tweaking it and get better and better at completing and finishing. You then become a lot more flexible. You become a lot more confident in your ability to create. You become more prolific. And here's another final thing. When it comes to creating a lot of things, you can never guess and you can never predict the things that will actually hit. Any person who's ever created a lot of things and then their work actually became successful, they'll tell you the same thing. You can never predict which blog posts are going to go viral. You can never predict which songs are going to go viral. You can never predict which product is going to blow up. But if you're creating, ultimately, you're going to get better and better and better. And and it's also a numbers game. You're putting yourself in a position where statistically, it's just something's going to pop, something's going to blow up, and you'll get better and better at measuring and seeing what works. So that's the 80% rule at work. That's the 80% rule of creativity. That's the 80% rule of ultimately getting work done. And so in this video, I'm going to talk to you about how to apply the 80-20 principle to your life so that you can actually focus on results, you can focus on effectiveness, and you can remove all of the weeds from your life that will constantly infiltrate you. You can actually create barriers. You've got to create and control your environment, or else it's going to create and control you. You've got to create and control your priorities, or else it'll be overrun by other people's priorities. And so the first aspect of applying the 80-20 principle is, first off, just knowing what it means. The 80-20 principle is the idea that 80% of your results comes from 20% of what you do. There's a few things that you do that produce most of the happiness, most of the results, most of the benefits. And then there's another 80% of activities or people or situations that are in your life that are mostly just weeds in your garden. They're things pulling you off course as an airplane. And it can be really hard to focus on those things which matter most. There's a great quote that says, it's a great question really, which is, are you caught in the thick of thin things? There's a lot of thin things out there, or lesser goals. There's a great quote from Robert Brault. He said, we're kept from our goal, not by obstacles, but by a clear path to a lesser goal. Those lesser goals are the weeds in your garden, or they're the turbulence pushing you off course. And so the first thing you need to do to actually apply the 80-20 principle in your life is, first off, define your desired future self. You have to define your future self, the person you want to be. And within that future self is what you value. What you value is what actually generates your future self. What do you value, and who's the person you want to be, and why do you care about that stuff? So actually defining what matters most to you. Where do you want to focus your attention? Who do you want to be? What do you want to double down on? There's a great way to look at everything in life, and that's that everything is either an investment towards your future self, which makes your future self bigger, or things are a cost towards your future self, which means you're actually making your future self less valuable. Wasting your time and just distracting yourself are costs to your future self. Eating unhealthy foods or engaging in unhealthy addictions ultimately creates a diminished value of your future self. Whereas if you're investing in your future self towards what you value, your future self becomes more valuable. And so clarifying what do you value and how can you start making more investments in those things so that your future self can increase in value. What's really interesting is that when you increase the value of your future self, your present immediately becomes better. There's a quote from Dan Sullivan. He said, the only way to make your present better is by making your future bigger, because whatever view you hold of your future shapes who you are in the present. It shapes what you do. It shapes how you feel. That's why it's really important to not only to cultivate hope, but also to cultivate commitment and to clarify what you value, and to look at your life and say, what are all of the things in my life that are contributing heavily towards what I value, and what are all the things that are ultimately distractions, weeds, and turbulence to my future self? What are the things that are diminishing the value of my future self? Going back to Robert Brault's quote, we're kept from our goal, not by obstacles, but by a clear path to lesser goals. If you have too many lesser goals, too many competing goals, then your future self is hazy. It's not clear. You want to zero in on what do you value more than anything? What do you care about? What matters more than anything? And then you remove those lesser goals. You remove the weeds. You remove the friction so that your future becomes clear, so that your present can also become clear and prioritized. Once you've actually clarified what you value, what matters to you, what results you want, what you care about, you need to look at your life and say, what are the key things contributing to that future self? What are the things in my life that represent the 20%, which creates almost all of the value in my future self? Because there's so many things you're doing that are a waste of time. So for me, as an example, my faith is part of my 20% that really matters. As I invest more and more in that, every area of my life gets better. And it's important to actually bring up a concept in psychology as we're talking about this. So in psychology, passion has been broken up into two categories. You have obsessive passion and you have harmonious passion. Obsessive passion is unhealthy. Obsessive passion is where you're controlled by your passion. It's emotionally driven, it's reactive. You really get single-sided, and you put a lot of energy into something, but you're not really intrinsically motivated towards it. You're actually just operating out of impulse. And you know that you're operating on this kind of passion because you obsess on it and you can't be present. It pulls you from being present towards the things that matter, and ultimately it ends up costing the other areas of your life. So if you start obsessing on something unhealthily and you're kind of being driven by it in an unhealthy way, a reactive way, an emotionally driven way, then it's going to cost you the other areas of your life. So you know something's obsessive if it's actually making the other areas of your life worse off, and if it's dragging and distracting you from being in flow towards the things that matter. Whereas a harmonious passion is things that you control the passion. It doesn't control you. You're intrinsically motivated toward it, and it actually benefits all the other areas of your life. You can easily go into flow. It's value-based. It's clear goal-based. It's not reactive. It's something you can control, but specifically, it improves the other areas of your life. And so you want to look at your life in priorities in the manner of, is this harmonious or is this obsessive? When I think about my faith, it's certainly harmonious, because when I invest more and more into my faith, it actually improves the other areas of my life. It improves my family. It improves my decision-making. It improves how I go about all of my actions. And so part of my 80-20 is my faith. Other one is my family. And then it gets a lot more personalized, and you have to decide what for you creates most of your results. For me, one of them is writing. Writing is how I became a professional author. Writing is ultimately how I became an entrepreneur. Writing pays the bills for me, and writing is where I get most of my learning done. Writing is part of my 20% that creates way outweighted results. Every time I invest, $1 into writing, I get $100 back, kind of thing. And what's interesting is when it comes to the 80-20, most people, they spend way less of their time on the things which matter most, and they invest almost all of their time in things which matter least. They're caught in the thick of thin things. And so for me, I've been taking time to look at where are the 80-20 in my life. How can I invest more into those things? And from a psychology standpoint, motivation is often broken into two categories. You've got approach motivation and you've got avoid motivation. Now, avoid motivation means you're avoiding things you don't want. That could be weeding the garden, and that's certainly important. You want to weed out the garden. You want to remove those lesser goals. You want to remove the distractions. You want to create and control your environment. I also love the quote from Zig Ziglar. He said, your input shapes your outlook. So part of weeding out the garden and removing the 80% of trash that's distracting you from your future self and ultimately costing and devaluing your future self is, what are the inputs that are pulling you away from the 20% that matter most? We live in obviously a media-driven world. And so it can be easy to get sucked in and realize that you've actually gone way more off course than you think. Maybe you've gotten sucked way into the turbulence and now you need to course correct. And so a big aspect of applying the 80-20 principle to your life is every week, it's really good to take 10 to 30 minutes to review your week, review how you did, review the results you got, and then to make better plans for the next week. It's also good on a daily basis to define out 3 key wins that you want and then to approach those wins. Approach means when you wake up, start approaching aggressively the results you want to make that day. The faster you can wake up and start aggressively investing in your future self, meaning you're actually taking action towards things that are generating your future self. That, for me, that could be writing the book, or making this video, or spending time with my kids. Whatever the 80-20 is, you want to invest in that early and often. Just like you'd want to invest, like literally in the stock market early and often. The sooner you invest, the longer the compound, and the more often you invest, the more committed you become. Because your behavior is what, generates your identity in a large part. You are what you repeatedly do. Also, when it comes to removing friction, I would invite you every 90 days. Every 90 days, take stock, because life changes no matter what on a 90-day basis. But if you're someone approaching goals or pursuing your future self, inevitably over a 90-day period of time, some disorganization has happened, some weeds have crept in, maybe some bad habits, or just by nature of growth, things have gotten slightly out of hand. And so every 90 days, it's nice to recalibrate, maybe take a few hours to reorganize, clean out your closet, if you will, because maybe some extraneous clothes got put in there, or maybe just your systems have gotten disorganized as you've grown. And so every 90 days, revisit your future self, and it will slightly change over a 90-day period even. There's a great quote from Josh Waitzkin. Josh Waitzkin wrote the book, The Art of Learning, and every 90 days he asks himself this question: what did I believe 90 days ago that I don't believe anymore? So ideally, if you're on an approach mindset, meaning you're approaching your future self, you're learning, you're growing, you're experiencing what neuroscientists would call prediction errors. Prediction errors happen when you try something you've never done before and you incorrectly predicted it, because your brain forms memories to predict your behavior, but it can only predict your behavior based on past experience. And so when you're trying new things, you're actually exposing yourself to new things. You're going to have a lot of prediction errors because you're going to see that your experiences aren't the full picture. And what's great about prediction errors, which is another word for learning, is if you are someone who's highly committed to your goals, or high hope, as psychologists would say, you'll take feedback from your experiences and you'll use that to improve your process. Also, when you experience prediction errors, you will change your memories. Your memories literally change to update themselves based on the new information it has. And so every 90 days, it's good to recalibrate. revisualize your future, reset your goals, and then to weed out the garden and to refocus in on your 80-20. What matters more than anything right now? Where have weeds crept in? Where have I gotten off course due to turbulence? And how can I then double down on what matters most? The more you invest in the few things which matter to you, what Greg McKeown would call the essential, the more you invest in what matters more than anything else, the further your future self will go, the bigger your future self will get. And as you keep investing early and often into your future self will keep getting bigger. And the reason for that is because you'll be building confidence. You'll be building confidence because you will have taken action, goal-oriented action. And that's really the key, is clarifying what you want, knowing what you want, and also knowing that it's already yours. And you build that knowing by actually committing. You commit to what you want, and then through that commitment, you take action towards your future self. And by taking action, you build confidence, and that confidence then creates an inner knowing that what you want is already yours. And then you keep clearing out the lesser goals, keep clearing out the stuff that doesn't matter. There are a few things in your life that matter. I love the quote that you cannot overestimate the unimportance of practically everything. Almost everything is not important. Almost everything is a distraction towards your future self. And so taking the time to say, who is my future self? What do I value more than anything? What do I want to invest in and grow? And what are the 80-20 that get me there? What are the few relationships to keep investing in? What are the few behaviors that create almost all of my results? And then how can I get rid of everything else? I would also invite you to look at your calendar over the next week, over the next month, and look and say, what actually on my calendar is in the 80% that is a waste of time, and literally remove it. Remove those lesser goals, pull out those weeds. Every time you do that, you're reflecting your future self. Your future self is more valuable than you because ideally they're more valuable than you. It's like compound interest. If you invest, your future self keeps getting bigger and bigger. You may have a few seeds in your hand right now, but to your future self, that may be an entire orchard. And so your future self has enormously more potential than you have, to the extent you actually invest in your future self and don't cost them. And so you want to start being your future self now. You want to live and be from your future self, not towards your future self. A lot of people think you have to think to your goal, but really you want to start thinking from your goal. You begin with the end in mind, and then you live towards the end in mind and from the end in mind. You think from your goal, you make decisions from your goal, and you be from your goal, not to it. You're not trying to get up there. You actually just elevate yourself and you start doing what your future self would do now. And that starts with your calendar. Look at your calendar and genuinely assess, what of these things is actually a distraction from my future self? What of these things is pulling me away from my future self? What of these things is turbulence? What of these things is weeds and distraction? The 80% of things that are ultimately a distraction from my future self, and start eliminating them as your future self would. Your future self is already where you want to be, and they don't need to waste time. And here's what's interesting. You get to where you want to go by being that person now. You have to start being your future self now and doing what they would do, and that's how you actually become your future self. It's not like you just eventually disappear and reappear there. You have to start being that person now and start making the decisions they would make, removing the weeds. And so I would invite you to, first off, clarify your future self, clarify what you value and what you want to invest in, and then zero in on the 80-20. What are the few things that really matter, and start doubling down on your investments in those things and peeling out, weeding out the garden of your life with the things that don't matter. And every 90 days, reevaluate, re-clarify your future self, and reset your 80-20 targets. Because every 90 days, it will change a little bit. You'll have had some prediction errors. You'll have grown. You'll have changed. You'll have adjusted. The world will have adjusted. You'll know things in 90 days that you don't know now. And so you can re-clarify, reinvest at a higher level, and ultimately you can make enormous progress every 90 days. You can focus on what matters. You can control your environment. You can control your inputs. You can control who you become. And your future self really cares. Your future self cares what you do now. Your future self wants you to make powerful investments in them and in the things which matter most, because your future self can grow dramatically beyond what you think. Compound interest is, as Einstein would say, the eighth wonder of the world. It grows bigger than you think if you keep investing in it. And so your future self is bigger than you think in amazing ways, but also in negative ways if you're not investing the right way. According to Cal Newport, focus is the number one skill of the 21st century. Deep work is what he calls it. Being able to focus on one thing for a long period of time, being able to get into a flow state, being able to accomplish more and more and more. We have all of this amazing technology to be able to produce better and easier results. But the problem is that same technology is incredibly addictive. And so most people are focused for less and less periods of time. And in this video, I'm going to break down the science of how you can actually create flow and focus very easily and accomplish a lot more in a lot less time, because you don't need more time. Actually, being focused has a lot to do with being in a flow state, and being in a flow state has a lot to do with recovery. So it's actually about working less, but working on better things, focusing on one outcome at a time rather than 10 outcomes at a time. So let me first start with a few psychological principles. The first one is called selective attention. Selective attention is an idea in psychology that says that whatever you focus on expands. You can only focus on one thing at a time, but also your brain looks for the things that it's excited about. Your brain looks for things that matter to it. So for example, if you're driving on the road, you probably notice other people who drive the same car as you. Your brain's focused on what's relevant. And so you can train your brain to focus on what you want by having clear goals, by writing about your goals, by being public about your goals, and then by actively focusing on people who are where you want to be. That's one of the key principles of high performance, is knowing where you want to be and regularly looking at that and then making that a part of your identity. Your identity is who you are and how you see yourself, and that has a lot to do with your view of your own future. So you can train your brain to focus on whatever it is you want to see, and one way to know what your own focus is what do you see? What are the things that pop up in your news feed? What are the things you pay attention to? That has a lot to do with how you've trained your brain. Your mind is like a garden, and you plant seeds in it all the time, and those seeds either grow fruit or weeds or things like that, but you want to cultivate that garden, which is something you do through meditation, through journaling, and through prayer, and also then through planting the specific types of seeds you want. So selective attention is whatever you focus on expands, and you can train that focus through journaling, through repetition, through speaking. And so that's the first key of focus, is what is it you actually want to focus on? What is it you want to drive your brain towards? What are the outcomes you want to accomplish? Who is your future self? The next concept is called strategic ignorance. Strategic ignorance is the idea that you don't want to be informed about everything. A lot of people have FOMO these days, and they want to be informed about everything. They want to know what's on the news. They want to know what's on people's social media feed. The truth is that you want to be ignorant of almost everything, because almost everything is a distraction. As Greg McKeown said in the book Essentialism, you cannot overestimate the unimportance of practically everything. Almost everything is a distraction. You don't need to be informed about most things. In fact, if you have clear goals, and if you have clear values, and if you actually have a life, you want to become informed on less and less. You need to obviously be informed on things that really matter, but there's so many things you're aware of that you probably shouldn't be an expert at. A lot of people are experts at things like sports, celebrities, this, that. What are you an expert at that's ultimately not driving your future self? What are you an expert at that's ultimately a waste of time? You might be an expert, for example, at what your high school friends are doing because you spend so much time on social media. So what are the things you should be ignorant of that you just don't even need to enter your brain? There's a great quote from Zig Ziglar, the famous speaker, and he said, your input determines your outlook, and your outlook determines your performance. And so whatever you're letting into your brain, that's shaping you. Garbage in, garbage out. Whatever you let in literally shapes your brain, it shapes your desires, it shapes your interests. And so there's a lot of things you want to be ignorant of. You definitely want to be ignorant of notifications. That's a key aspect of flow and focus, is creating an environment where flow is organic, where flow just happens. And so you want to shape your environment. There's a quote from Marshall Goldsmith. Marshall Goldsmith said, if you do not create and control your environment will create and control you. So one of those things is obviously removing things that hit your conscious attention that you shouldn't be aware of, at least right now. Having rules on technology, keeping your smartphone on airplane mode for longer periods of time, especially during focus times. If you want to focus, let's just say for 60 to 90 minutes at a time, your phone should probably be away from your body. It should be on airplane mode so you're not getting notifications. And you should probably have rules for when your phone is not on airplane mode and when you're going to use it. You definitely should not use your phone for notifications and things like that during the first 90 minutes of your day. Your brain is at an optimal state for creativity, for decision making, and for learning first thing in the morning. And if you're looking at your phone and plugging into notifications, then you're wiring your brain for scatteredness. But if you wake up, you're slow, you meditate, you pray, you journal about what you're trying to accomplish, and then you take needed action on the number one thing you're trying to accomplish that day, then if you get into a state of actually being used to being focused, being used to being flow, and you actually knock something out significant during the first 60 to 90 minutes of your day, then you've already created a more balanced, more slow, more focused approach to your day. Less frenetic. Most people, they wake up and they're letting so many ping pong balls enter their brain. They're also opening themselves up to other people's agendas. When you first wake up and if you open your email or if you open your social media, you actually are like walking into a casino. You don't know what you're actually looking at. You're going into an environment where you're expecting to be ping-ponged around. You don't know what's gonna be in the newsfeed. You don't know what's gonna capture your attention. You don't know where you're gonna get stuck on a video for 5 to 10 minutes. So you're literally putting yourself into an environment where you don't know what the outcome's gonna be, and you're just playing as the ping pong ball. That's not how you create focus, and if you use that as your habit, then that's how you're gonna be for the rest of your day. But if you wake up and move slow, keep your brain moving slow, meditate, reflect, journal, and be purposeful about one key outcome. There's a quote that says, most people overestimate what they can do in a day, but underestimate what they can do in a year. Most people are trying to accomplish so much in one day. They have like 10 or 15 items on their to-do list, and they're trying to knock out all sorts of stuff. And when you do that, you're moving 20 different directions in a single day. If, for example, you had a key outcome that you were trying to accomplish and you focused on the one most important thing, and if you knock that out, then you would make more progress over a year. You can make huge progress over a year or over 5 years, over a decade, if you're taking the right actions, if you're taking the most focused core actions moving forward. The problem is that most people are trying to do too much at once and they're moving in no directions at all. There's a very powerful quote from Robert Brault. Robert Brault said, "We're kept from our goal, not by obstacles, but by a clear path to lesser goals." That's how most people live their life. They're not moving towards their goal because they have too many clear paths to lesser goals. They're trying to do too many competing things at once, and because they're scattered, they're not experiencing flow, they're not experiencing focus. They're looking at their phone, they're looking at their email, they're trying to do this, they're trying to do that. Instead, you want to have less things. That's why strategic ignorance is so powerful. But in order to actually apply strategic ignorance, you need to have values, you need to have beliefs, and you need to have goals. What actually matters to you and what doesn't matter to you. You can't define things as unimportant if you don't have things that are truly important to you. But if you've then defined what's important, if you've defined what you value, how you want to spend your time, what's worth investing in, and if you've defined your future, then you can create an environment that shields you from almost everything else. You can then create an environment and create rules where you're not letting so many things push you off course. There's another powerful concept that comes from physics that will help you learn how to focus better. It's called the Totalitarian Principle. And according to the Totalitarian Principle, anything that is not forbidden becomes compulsory. What that means is if you don't create rules to stop something from happening, it will happen. If you don't have rules for your phone or for your social media, then you're gonna act compulsory. You're gonna act out of impulse or out of reaction. You're not gonna actually be smart. You're not gonna be intentional. Instead, the world's gonna be happening to you. You're gonna be reactive to your environment rather than creating your environment and proactively acting. So one of the ways to apply the totalitarian principle is first define what you want, define the change you're trying to make, and then create an environment that supports that. Me, for example, one of the things that I'm trying to do is have my phone on my body less when I'm at home with my wife and my 5 kids. And so that's one of the things that I've actually told them is that that's my goal, and I've created an environment of accountability so that my kids actually call me out when I'm not applying it. And so a key aspect of applying the totalitarian principle or making any change you want is to define that change and then become public about that change and ask your environment to support you on that change because it's something you really want to do. You want to make that thing forbidden, or at least forbidden during certain periods of time, and you want the environment to also believe that that thing is forbidden to you. In my case, when I'm home after 2 or 3 o'clock in the day, I want to be fully present with my wife and kids, and so I've told them that that's my goal and that's what I want them to hold me accountable to. It is forbidden for me to have my phone on my person when I get home for certain hours. Another problem that most people have when it comes to focus is that they actually try to work for way too long. It's like exercising for 5 hours a day. You don't need that much. Most people are actually overworking themselves and not recovering enough. Instead, you only want to focus on like 3 to 5 really good hours a day, and then you want to step back. And if you become results focused, Dan Sullivan actually, he's the founder of Strategic Coach and the #1 entrepreneurial coach in the world. He says there are 2 economies. There is the results economy, which is the economy that focuses on getting the desired result in the most effective way. And then there is the time and effort economy, which is where most people are at. And their economy thinks that you're being successful if you're putting a lot of time and effort into something. It's not about how much time and effort it takes. It's about getting the result as effectively as possible. And usually if you can set your environment up, if you know the one thing that will create the biggest result, if you're clear on your goals, clear on your values, and if you've created an environment that keeps you from distraction, then 3 to 5 hours of work a day is really probably all you need if you're producing massive results, if you're in flow, if you're not getting binged and tinged from all of the notifications. There's actually research that shows that if you're pulled from flow, it usually takes you about 20 to 30 minutes to get back into flow. So every time you get a notification, every time you get pulled from your focus, it takes you time to get back into the depths of flow where high performance is. So that's why you want to block things out and really focus for 60 to 90 minutes, because as you go deeper into flow, you get better and better performance. It becomes more subconscious. It becomes more powerful. The problem is that most people never actually get to that level because their environment's intruding on them, because they're not clear on what they want, and because they're not applying strategic ignorance. They're certainly not applying the totalitarian principle. So don't go for too many things and don't work yourself to death. Don't work too long. Instead, focus on performance, focus on results, not time and effort, and then give yourself ample time for recovery and rest. The final principle is recovery. There's a lot of research on the concept of psychological detachment from work, and the idea that unless you fully detach yourself so that you can recover, you can't actually get yourself into a flow state. You can't absorb yourself and get back into full absorption unless you fully detach. And so you need to give yourself plenty of time for recovery, plenty of time for hobbies, plenty of time for relationships. Full detachment means not only are you away from work, but your mind is away from it. Look at your phone like a magnet. If you're close to it, or any form of distraction, if you're close to it, you're like the metal. It will suck you in. No willpower will allow a piece of metal to not get sucked into a magnet. In order for the magnet to have no power over the metal needs to be far away from the magnet. If it's far away, the magnet has no power. That's how willpower works. If it's out of sight, it's out of mind. And so you need to remove work, remove technology, remove food sometimes, even fasting, remove certain things so that you can fully recover, fully enjoy the other aspects of your life. And if you give yourself time for more recovery, first off, you'll come into work just like a workout. If you recover, it's actually while you're recovering from a fitness standpoint that your body grows and gets strong. It's while you're recovering that your brain is actually creating all sorts of incredible connections and your subconscious is actually tying it together. Then you'll have way more to put into your work when you go into it. You'll have way more to work with. You'll have way more energy. You'll be way more clear, and you'll do it from a focused, flow-based standpoint. Then you get results, you focus for a few hours, and then you recover. And while you're recovering, you're actually growing immensely. And this is how you create results. This is how you can accomplish more over a day than most people do in a week, because most people are trying to accomplish too much. They're being pulled in too many directions. 90% of the time is spent distracted. So in this video, I'm going to talk about just a few simple key strategies so that you can really heighten your focus, do way more deep work, and be in way more flow. It's really not as hard as it thinks. First off, you want flow to be your target. And so one key aspect is having work-life integration. So like a lot of people, their work, they may be able to focus at work, but their life outside of work is trash. You want just as much flow when you're recovering as when you're actually working. If you study any optimal performer, LeBron James, etc., even, writers, people who are really creative or really good thinkers, even Bill Gates. Bill Gates had what he called think weeks, where he would disappear for a week. He would go way outside his routine environment and he would just read articles, and that's where he came up with a lot of his biggest ideas for Microsoft.
I take 2 weeks a year to just go off and read and think, where I'm not interrupted by work or anything else. I'm just solidly trying to think about the future, and people get to send me things to read as part of that so-called Think Week.
So you want to have high flow activities that are outside of your typical work. Stephen Kotler, one of the biggest researchers on the subject of flow, he wrote a book called The Rise of Superman, and then recently The Art of Impossible. He talks about having high flow activities that are more active recovery based. A lot of people think that recovery from work means basically just sitting on the couch and scrolling through the screen, and then that is a good form of recovery. That is not a good form of recovery. It's not restorative. You want an active form of recovery. So what Stephen Kotler does is he skis, like alpine skis down snowy mountains twice a week. He lives in a place where he can ski year round. And so skiing for him is a high flow activity. When he's bombing down a hill, he's totally absorbed in what he's doing. He's totally focused. And so he skis twice a week because being in flow transfers to the other areas of your life. If you're in flow in one area of your life, you're going to be more in flow in another area of your life. So one of the first things is having high quality active recovery activities that are also playful. Think about kids. Kids play a lot and kids are in flow a lot. It's not hard for kids to focus. Maybe it is harder nowadays. But if you think about just kids being out and playing, they can just enjoy it because it's playful. And for Kotler, his active recovery is also enjoyable. It's playful. And so it's important to have forms of active recovery that you just totally enjoy. What are activities that you just love? It could be reading. It could be exercise. It could be skiing. It could be whatever it is you want to do. So this actually proves that you need to integrate aspects into your life of just pure enjoyment. Things that suck you in, things that you love, that are not reactive, mindless scrolling. A lot of people have learned to just love scrolling mindlessly on the internet, but that doesn't teach you to be in flow. That teaches you to be reactive to external stimuli. Instead, you want to actually have what psychologists would call harmonious passion, which is something you love doing, but something you're intrinsically motivated towards, something you can control, and something that enhances the other areas of your life. For Kotler, skiing down the mountain enhances his writing. It enhances his flow towards his friends, his relationships. And so you want a high flow activity that benefits the other areas of your life. So having a playful, happy hobby that you integrate into your life. It could be anything. It could be yoga. It could be whatever you love, something that sucks you and gives you flow. Active recovery, healthy recovery. Psychologists actually call this psychological detachment from work. You need to fully detach, meaning you're out of the environment, but also out of the thought process of your work, giving your mind time away from it. And then when you come back, it's so much easier to be in flow. Now, when it comes to being in flow or an insane level of focus towards your work, there's a few key principles. One is super clear goals. All of the research on flow says you need clear goals because goals give you constraints. They actually give you something to focus on. They give you a lens. They give you a focus. And so having very clear, measurable goals is crucial to having flow. Also, having few goals. Don't have too many. Think about it. If you have 10 items on your to-do list, then your mind is paralysis by analysis. You might have stress. And so having no more than 3 items on your to-do list in a single day, ideally closer to 1 item on your to-do list. So you have a very clear, measurable target. And then you want to apply aspects of design thinking, but also situation thinking. So when it comes to design thinking, you want to have a deadline as a result. So not only do you want one goal, but you need a deadline. Parkinson's law says that work fills the space you give it. And so it's really easy, as an example, for a writer to focus when they have like a deadline of a week because they know that deadline is crushing them. There's a great quote from Will Durant. He said that the ability of the average person could be doubled if the situation demanded it. So you want to design the situation so that it demands the result. And that often is a deadline. Having social consequences, personal consequences if you don't produce the result, having a small deadline really helps. When it comes to environment design, you can do a lot of things. Keep your phone on airplane mode away from your body. You could also use apps. For example, I'm literally right now listening to Focus at Will. Focus at Will is quiet, awesome music that's designed to put your brain into an alpha focus state. So you can design your environment for flow and for focus. And so you want to design your environment. Keep your phone away from your body. Keep it on airplane mode. Have clear goals. Have few goals. Also, you want to make starting very easy. BJ Fogg, who is the Stanford psychologist, he wrote Tiny Habits. Also, the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, which is largely based on BJ's research. They talk about, and this is really true of behavior design, making it as small as possible. Starting. You want to remove as much friction as you can to starting the activity. So as an example, if you want to focus on writing, if you're a writer, just make it as small as possible. Give yourself the small single goal of maybe writing a single sentence or a single paragraph. Because if you can remove the friction to starting, then often you can get into a flow state. And once you get into a flow state and you start getting momentum and start, even just taking a little action gives you a little bit of momentum in the right direction, builds your confidence and gets you into flow, then it becomes easy to just carry forward. As an example with this video, I had a very small outline. My goal was to film maybe a 2-minute video, but I knew that by making the goal really small and easy and friction-free, I'd be able to get into a flow state and film like a 6, 7, 8-minute video because I was in flow. And right now I'm in flow for a few reasons. One is I need to finish this video in a few minutes because I have a deadline, something to do next. I've designed the environment. I don't have any distractions around me. This was really my primary goal for the day, is just to film a few of these videos. And I made starting really small and really easy. One other aspect is called forcing functions. And forcing functions and design thinking are very similar. A forcing function is a situational constraint that requires you to take an action. So a deadline could be a forcing function. Having consequences to your actions could be a forcing function. So in high performance sports like motocross and stuff, a forcing function for them is that if they crash, they could be dead. And so when they're doing backflips and stuff over, huge jumps, they're in deep flow and deep focus because the consequences for failure are massive. And so you could also put yourself in a situation where the consequences are a little higher for failure. For example, if you don't accomplish your goal today, for example, you don't write that 5-page article or whatever you're going to do, or do whatever it is you want to accomplish, there's some cost or consequence. You maybe have to give your friend $100 or something, or you could make the consequences higher. And so the more there's consequences for failure, the more there's social accountability, there's a short timeline. Those are good forcing functions. Also, the more you're personally invested. Financial investment leads to commitment. And so if you're invested financially and in other ways, then there's higher costs or perceived costs to not taking action. And then obviously designing the environment, making the environment around you simple, clear, removing friction to start. Making the goal small, having a few goals, but making it very clear, very measurable, because that gives you constraints in which to focus on. Those are just some of the key aspects of flow and focus. You can have intense flow and focus in your work and also out of your work. And the more flow you have, the more it just becomes your way of being. And I would argue having clear rules around technology in this world is a crucial aspect of having deep work. Deep work being deep, meaningful, creative work, but also deep connection, which is obviously being lost. You want to have deep peak experiences in and out of work. Peak experiences are things that you can invest in. They don't have to be big. They can be simple. But when you go home, be home. Another easy way to do that is have a routine or a ritual so that when you're leaving work, you write down the 1, 2, or 3 things you want to accomplish tomorrow, and then you just turn off your brain and you just say, I'm done, I can walk away. And then you go and you have active recovery, whether that's playing with your kids, making a fun meal with your kids, going to the gym, going on a walk, like doing things that you enjoy and that give you flow and that allow you to just be present and allow you to recover and allow you to prep for sleep. One other key aspect of recovery and sleep is obviously gratitude. There's a lot of research that shows that gratitude at the end of your day, just write down 3 things you're grateful for, helps you be happier, number 1, but also helps you sleep better, number 2. So part of active recovery is keeping your phone on airplane mode more often than not. Having rules around when your phone's on your body. We've become so reactive that we think we need to, and keep your phone on silent 24/7 so that you're not, unless for some reason there's a period of time where you're waiting for a really important call, you shouldn't be pulled out of flow regularly by notifications. Your phone should always be on silent, but secondly, actually putting it on airplane mode and keeping it away from your body more often than you think. And just having rules about when you'll check it and being fine and being comfortable replying tomorrow or in 2 days, not needing to reply immediately and being in way more flow. High flow in one area translates to high flow in other areas. You can have an amazing life of flow and peak experiences and active recovery and play and enjoyment and connection outside of work, and that will also fuel your flow and your commitment at work. And you can accomplish great, meaningful things every single day. I'm Dr. Benjamin Hardy. I hope this video helped. Please focus, get in flow, do some deep work. Have an amazing day. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. Have an amazing day.